Welcome back, everyone, to the channel Confessions of the Elderly. My mother-in-law is 65 years old and works as a street cleaner. One day, she found 50 million Vietnamese dongs and immediately returned it to the owner. Unexpectedly, the owner accused her of stealing 20 million. She immediately opened her bag and took out something that left him stunned. My name is Hong. I am 35 years old, and I live with my husband and mother-in-law in a small house at the end of an old alley. We aren't wealthy, but things have always been peaceful. My husband's name is Ton, and he works as a sales team leader for a fairly large construction materials company. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Liu, is 65 this year and still wears her faded orange uniform every day to sweep the streets. Many people hear that and often stare at me, asking, "Wait, your son has a stable office job, why does she still work so hard?" At first, I used to ask the exact same thing. When I first married into the family, I saw her pedaling her old bike home, hunched over, almost every night at 10 p.m. She was always covered in the smell of dust and street trash. My heart broke for her. Some days, when it rained heavily and she had a fever, she would still wrap herself in a soaked raincoat to go to work. I would just choke up watching her. I once sat down next to her and said softly, "Mom, please quit. We can support you now." She just gave a gentle smile, her hands still picking through vegetables in the yard. "As long as I'm healthy, I'll keep working. Every little bit I earn helps you both each month." After saying that, she went back to her work as if nothing had happened. My mother-in-law is that kind of person. She's used to a life of hardship, she doesn't know how to enjoy leisure, and she doesn't want to be a burden to her children. One time, I secretly tucked money into her bag so she could buy a new pair of shoes. Yet the next day, she put the money back on the table, while her shoes remained patched over and over. She said the shoes were torn, not her feet. It made me feel both pity and helplessness. My husband has also tried many times to convince her to quit, but she adamantly refuses. Ton loves his mother very much. His father passed away early when he was a child, and Mrs. Liu raised him on her own through hard labor, so since he started earning money, his biggest wish has been to let his mother rest. But the more she loves her children, the less she wants to live off them. Lately, my husband's company has been preparing to appoint a new deputy manager. Everyone says Ton is very likely to be chosen because his team's sales have led for 2 years straight. Even the CEO appreciates him for his calm demeanor and reliable work. There is only one person who doesn't like that, Min Quan. Min Quan works in the same department as my husband. He's always cheerful on the outside, acting like everyone's best friend, but he's incredibly cunning underneath. Ton has caught him several times intentionally stealing clients and contracts, only to blame others. One late evening while I was setting the table, I saw my husband sitting pensively on the balcony, letting his cigarette burn down to the filter without even taking a puff. I walked out and asked, "What's wrong?" He was silent for a moment before saying, "Juan said some really unpleasant things today." I sat down next to him, and he gave a faint, bitter smile. He said a manager should have a proper family background, and having a relative who sweeps the streets is bad for one's image. After hearing that, my face flushed with anger. Did he really say that? Ton nodded. I was so furious that I slammed my glass onto the table. What kind of person is he? What is so wrong with being a janitor? My husband just sighed. You really want to punch him, don't you? But the promotion review is coming up soon, so it's not worth causing a scene. I know he's not holding back because he fears Min Quan, but because he's afraid of jeopardizing all his years of hard work. I didn't expect that my mother-in-law had heard everything that day. She was sitting in the kitchen, mending a pair of old, frayed gloves. I remember clearly how the yellow light shone down on her hair, which was nearly half gray. She was silent for a long time, then suddenly said, "Any honest job is honorable. I'm not begging anyone for a living." Those light words made my heart tighten with pain. From that day on, I started noticing that whenever she went to work, she would avoid wearing her janitor uniform in front of the neighbors. Sometimes she even changed clothes at the end of the alley before continuing on. Even though she didn't say anything, I knew Min Quan's words had hurt her pride. Then the night when everything happened finally came. It was nearly 11 o'clock at night. I remember well because I was just about to go to bed when I saw my mother-in-law in her reflective vest, holding a broom, getting ready to head out the door. I yawned and asked, "Working the late shift, Mom?" She smiled. "Yes, I have to sweep the stretch by the park before heading home." Before leaving, she turned back and asked, "Where is my phone, Hong?" I handed her the old phone with the cracked screen. She took it and beamed with joy. "My friends online and I are supposed to keep talking tonight. If I don't livestream, I might fall asleep on the way." I chuckled. "You're so modern now, Mom." She waved her hand, just pretending, not really. With that, she pushed her old trash cart out to the end of the alley. At that moment, no one in my family expected that the live stream, which seemed just for fun, would hours later become the thing that saved us from the most terrible scheme of our lives. But to understand why finding money in the middle of the night turned into a vicious trap aimed at my family, we have to go back to that very evening, when my mother-in-law had just pushed the trash cart out of the small alley. It wasn't raining that night, but the wind blew in cold gusts. The road by the park was emptier than usual, with only a few shops packing up and a few motorbikes rushing past before disappearing at the intersection. My mother-in-law walked slowly along the sidewalk, one hand holding a broom, the other occasionally adjusting the old phone mounted on the cart's handle. On the screen, her regular friends were still commenting and asking her things. She swept and laughed. "There are fewer leaves in this area tonight, so I might be able to go home early." Her voice rang out steadily in the late night, sounding both simple and pitiful. To her, those live streams weren't about fame or money, just for someone working the night shift. Having a few people to talk to through the screen made it feel less lonely. She often talked about vegetable prices at the market, the stray cat by the trash bin, or her aching back when the weather changed. The viewers were all older folks too. They would drop in to listen and offer a few words of encouragement to warm each other's hearts. She had tilted the phone on the cart, so the camera unintentionally captured a stretch of the road ahead. The dim yellow streetlights cast light onto the pavement. Her hunched shadow swept long strokes across the road, small yet persistent. Occasionally when someone passed by, she would pull her cart to the side and say, "Go ahead, dear, I can sweep later." When she approached a large planter near the edge of the sidewalk, her broom suddenly stopped. At the base of the tree, mixed among some dry leaves and a piece of old newspaper, lay a slightly open black leather wallet, and right next to it was a bundle of cash held by a rubber band. Just by looking, you could tell it wasn't just a few $100,000. Mrs. Liu stood frozen for a few seconds. Someone on the live stream even commented, "What did you see, Ms. Liu?" She leaned down and picked up the wallet and the bundle of cash. Her voice at that moment clearly showed panic. "Oh my God, who could have dropped so much money?" Saying that, she looked around the deserted street. In the distance, only a small truck had just turned the corner, and the rest were just trees standing silent in the wind. She opened the wallet to take a quick look, just enough to know it contained documents, an ID card, an employee badge, a few bank cards, and another stack of cash. She didn't count every single bill right there. But watching the video later, it was clear she had placed the money on the trash cart lid, separated the stacks, and muttered, 50 million, oh my God. Whoever lost this must be having a heart attack. She was uneducated but honorable. She counted the money very carefully. For having spent a lifetime working for every hard-earned penny, she understood how panicked the person who lost such a large sum would be. She hurriedly wiped her hands with a towel and then put all the money and the wallet into the crossbody cloth bag on her chest. Just then, a regular viewer on the live stream commented, "Take it to the police station immediately. Having that much money is very dangerous." She nodded and spoke into the phone. "Yes, I'll take it to the station. It's someone else's property, not mine to keep." After that sentence, she fumbled to lock the screen, fearing that streaming while walking would drain the battery. But she didn't know that her old phone had a touch error. Even though the screen was off, the app continued to record and automatically save the video in the background. It was thanks to that seemingly annoying glitch that the truth wasn't buried later on. My mother-in-law was even more unaware that less than 20 meters from where she stood, in the shadows behind an old bus stop, a man was holding a phone, filming the entire scene. He wore a black jacket, his baseball cap pulled low to hide half his face. He stood tucked in the shadow of a utility pole, only exposing his phone camera toward her. That was Min Kwan. Later, when everything was exposed, we realized he had been tracking my mother-in-law's work schedule for days. He knew which streets she usually swept late at night, knew when the area was empty, and even knew she often live-streamed with her friends, yet he arrogantly assumed an old woman wouldn't know how to save evidence. He deliberately placed the wallet and the stack of cash exactly where she would pass, then stood in a dark corner to wait. In his mind, everything was already calculated. If Mrs. Liu picked up the money and took it home, he would edit the video. He'd frame it as her bending down to steal the wallet, report her to the police, and blast it online with the headline, "Mother of Deputy Manager Candidate Steals Money at Midnight." If she tried to return it, he would move to the second act, accusing her of returning an incomplete amount and painting her as a greedy person pretending to be honest. No matter which path she chose, he thought he would win. His goal from the beginning was never the 50 million, that money was just bait. What he really wanted was my mother-in-law's honor, Tan's reputation, and the deputy manager seat my husband had a chance to reach. For a lowlife like Min Kwan, winning through merit was too hard, so he chose to drag others into the mud. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law remained oblivious, clutching the cloth bag tightly to her chest, muttering, "Whoever lost money at this hour must be so worried." Behind her back, in the darkness, Min Kwan lowered his phone, his lips curling into a smirk. He thought he had just set a perfect trap, never suspecting that the cracked phone of an old cleaner was silently recording every dirty second of his actions. The next morning, my mother-in-law woke up earlier than usual. She had barely slept all night, restless thinking about the person who lost that money. She told me, "They lost 50 million. Their home must be in complete chaos right now." I was still half asleep when I heard her bustling about in the kitchen. She hastily poured a cup of hot tea and carefully took the wallet out of her fabric bag to check it once more. She didn't count the money again. She just looked at the documents inside and put them back in the same place. Before leaving, she told me, "Hong, I'm heading to the committee office for a moment. Someone's money is here. I can't feel at ease leaving it in the house for even a minute longer." Quote, "At that time, I simply thought she would drop it off and return, never imagining that morning would be the start of a storm crashing down on my family." The ward committee office was quite crowded that morning. Some were there to verify documents, others were asking about procedures. Some older people were sitting on the porch drinking tea, waiting for their turn. My mother-in-law wore her sanitation worker uniform, which was clean but faded at the shoulders. In her hand was an old fabric bag. The strap was worn out. She walked in a bit timidly, like poor people often do in public offices, always afraid of bothering others. She went to the desk and said to the young officer, "Sir, I found a wallet with a lot of money in it. Could you please help me contact the owner?" The officer looked up at her, then at the wallet she placed on the desk, his expression turning more serious at the mention of a lot of money. Mrs. Liu hurried to add, "There is a lot of money in there, sir. Please call the owner to come quickly, they must be very worried." The officer opened the wallet to check the documents, saw the ID and employee card inside, and nodded. He took out a notebook to record the information and asked her what time she found it. "Where?" My mother-in-law clearly recounted every stretch of road, every tree, and how she was sweeping at the end of her shift. Her voice was neither too fast nor too slow, just a bit anxious out of fear that the owner was impatient. The officer found a phone number on a business card tucked inside the wallet and called immediately. The person on the other end answered very quickly, as if they had been waiting for that call for a long time. He spoke a few words and then turned to my mother-in-law. "The owner is on their way, ma'am. They said they are nearby." My mother-in-law sighed in relief and pulled up a plastic chair to wait. She was secretly happy, thinking the matter was almost over. Little did she know that the person on their way was not just an ordinary person who had lost their money, but someone who had set a trap since the night before. About 15 minutes later, Min Kwan appeared. He wore a light-colored dress shirt and crisp trousers, his hair neatly combed, his face feigning distress. As soon as he entered, he looked around once and walked straight to the officer's desk. "Where is my wallet?" The officer pointed to the wallet on the desk. Upon seeing my mother-in-law, Min Kwan immediately switched to an emotional expression. He stepped forward, grabbed her hands, his voice trembling. "Thank goodness, I've been searching all night, ma'am. Did you find it?" "Thank you so much." My mother-in-law is honest. Seeing him so relieved, she felt at ease. She smiled kindly. "It's nothing, dear. It's yours, so I returned it. Keep it safe next time. Losing so much money is dangerous." Min Kwan nodded repeatedly, his mouth saying thanks, but his eyes were secretly scanning the room, seeing how many people were paying attention, who was holding a phone, and where the officer was standing. Then he opened the wallet, took out the cash, placed it on the table, and began counting the stacks right in front of everyone. 1 stack, 2 stacks, 3 stacks. The atmosphere was normal at first. People sitting in the waiting area glanced over then went back to talking. But when he finished counting, Min Kwan suddenly froze. He looked at the stack of money on the table, then at my mother-in-law. The face that was grateful just moments ago changed instantly, as if he had just discovered something horrific. He slammed his hand on the table, It's missing 20 million. The whole room immediately fell silent. The officer frowned. What did you say? Min Kwan pointed at the stack of money, his voice beginning to rise. There were 70 million in my wallet. Now there are exactly 50 million. It's clearly missing 20 million. My mother-in-law was stunned. She looked at the money and then at him, her lips trembling. That's not true, dear. I turned it in exactly as I found it. But Min Kwan didn't let her finish. He turned completely toward the people around him, intentionally speaking loudly. I know you're poor. I know you work hard as a cleaner, but being poor doesn't give you the right to take other people's money. That statement felt like a slap in the face to my mother-in-law. People in the room started whispering. Some looked at her faded work uniform, at the old plastic sandals on her feet, and then their expressions naturally changed. With just one sentence from Min Kwan, my mother-in-law went from a kind person returning money to a suspicious character in everyone's eyes. Ms. Liu turned pale but tried to keep her voice steady. I didn't take it. I'm returning it exactly as I found it. Min Kwan gave a cold laugh. Isn't that what everyone says when they steal something? If you didn't touch the money, why is exactly 20 million missing? The officer interrupted. Calm down, sir. We need to verify this first. Quote. Min Kwan immediately pulled out his phone and acted like he was dialing. No need to verify anything. I'll call the police right now. My money isn't just scrap paper. Quote. He stopped then, as if he had just remembered something. He turned to look at my mother-in-law, his eyes flashing with a brief, malicious glint. Oh, that's right. You're the mother of Ton from my company, aren't you? My mother-in-law froze. Min Kwan curled his lip, his voice lower but loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. How ironic. The son is about to be considered for deputy manager, and his mother gets involved in a theft. I wonder what the company will think when they hear about this. Only then did my mother-in-law begin to realize that this was no longer a simple misunderstanding, but my husband and I knew absolutely nothing about it at the time. Ton was still at the office preparing for the weekly meeting, and I was at home cleaning up breakfast. Out there, at the ward committee office, Min Kwan had begun to push his drama down the path he wanted. He didn't just want to frame my mother-in-law for stealing 20 million. He wanted to use that humiliation to drag down my husband's reputation. While my mother-in-law sat at the committee office, desperately trying to explain that she hadn't taken a single penny, Min Kwan silently launched his second strike. He didn't just want to win in that small room. He wanted the incident to spread to the place that would hurt my husband the most, the company. Later, Ton showed me his phone. In a private group chat for the sales department, Min Kwan had sent a video clip less than 10 seconds long. The video just showed my mother-in-law bending down to pick up a wallet from under a tree and putting it into her cloth bag. He cut out everything from the moment she checked the papers and said on the live stream that she would take them to the police station, up until she pushed the trash cart away. Right under the video, he typed just one sentence. Ton's mother is quite famous. Only one sentence, but as venomous as a viper. It didn't say it directly, but it was enough for others to jump to their own conclusions. In the group chat, people started dropping surprise emojis, and some asked, wait, what's going on? Someone coldly typed, half joking, looks like someone found lost property and doesn't want to return it. Those words quickly jumped across every phone screen and crept into every corner of the office. The scariest part was that at that very moment, my husband's company was preparing for a meeting to decide the deputy manager position. That meeting was extremely important. Ton had spent several nights preparing sales records, client reports, and the plan for the next quarter. The company's CEO is someone who highly values personal image, always saying that managers must not only be good at their work but also maintain their family's reputation. Min Kwan knew this well, so he chose the perfect time to strike. As the rumors began to spread, he sat in the meeting room with a calm expression. Meanwhile, Ton was presenting his plan to the board of directors, completely unaware that his mother was being humiliated at the police station. In the middle of the meeting, his phone vibrated continuously. At first, Ton didn't answer because he was standing in front of the presentation screen, but when he saw the precinct police calling for the third time, he asked for permission to step out. I received a call from Ton right after that. His voice was raspy. Hong, come to the station right away. Mother is in trouble. I pressed him for answers. What happened? What's wrong with Mother? He only said, someone is accusing Mom of stealing money. I'm rushing over there now. My hands turned ice cold. I left the pot of porridge boiling on the stove, grabbed my keys, and dashed out the door. Throughout the trip to the station, my heart pounded heavily. In my head, I kept picturing my elderly mother-in-law with her old fabric bag, standing alone amidst suspicious stares. When I arrived, Ton was already there. Just as I reached the door of the duty room, I heard Min Kwan's voice, cold and deliberately loud. "If you took it, just give it back. It's only 20 million, no big deal. Don't you feel ashamed for your son doing something like this?" I froze in my tracks. My mother-in-law was huddled on a plastic chair. Her thin, bony hands were clutching the strap of her fabric bag until her knuckles turned white. Her janitor uniform was still covered in road dust. Her gray hair was slightly disheveled beneath her hat rim. She wasn't crying, but her eyes were red-rimmed. That posture made my heart ache as if someone were squeezing it tight. Ton stood in front of his mother, his shoulders tense. He looked at Min Kwan, his voice stifling anger. "Speak properly. Nothing has been verified yet. What right do you have to accuse my mother?" Min Kwan immediately changed his expression. Just a moment ago he was aggressive, yet in front of everyone, he put on a pained look. He held his forehead, sighing like a man betrayed. "Ton, I treat you like a brother at work. I don't want to make a scene, but my money is truly missing. Your mother found the wallet. Now money is gone. What do you expect me to think?" Ton gritted his teeth, asking where the proof was that the wallet had 70 million. Min Kwan took out his phone, playing the edited video clip. "Here, I captured your mother picking up the wallet, and I remember very clearly how much was inside. I had just withdrawn it for personal matters." The local official frowned, noting that the video only shows her picking it up, not taking the money. Min Kwan glanced at the official and turned back to Ton. "I know the law, but what about honor? A mother involved in a theft like this, while her son is being considered for a promotion. How do you think the company board will see this?" That statement chilled me to the bone. He wasn't hiding his intentions anymore. He wanted to use my mother-in-law as a stain to drag Ton down right before his promotion review. I stepped in, standing beside my mother-in-law. She looked up at me, her lips trembling. "Hong, I didn't take it. I swear I didn't take it." I took her hand. It was rough, ice-cold, and still smelled of the familiar street cleaning water. I tried to keep my voice steady. "I believe you, mother." Min Kwan gave a cold laugh. "Belief is easy, but 20 million missing is still 20 million missing." Then he turned to the local official, speaking each word clearly and deliberately. "I request that a report be filed. If someone like that becomes a manager, my company will lose all its reputation." Ton immediately took a step forward. "Say that again if you dare." The tension in the room was as tight as a bowstring. A few people standing outside the door started raising their phones to record. The official had to stand up to intervene. "Gentlemen, please calm down. This is a committee office, not a place to argue." I looked at Min Kwan, and for the first time, I clearly saw the unconcealed glee behind his polite facade. He wanted Ton to lose his temper. He wanted my husband to lose control in front of the crowd to make things even worse. I tugged Ton's arm gently. "Don't fall for his trap." Ton froze. He turned to look at his mother, then at me. His eyes were a mixture of anger, helplessness, and pain. My mother-in-law was still sitting there, silent as someone backed into a corner. She kept her head down, looking at the old fabric bag in her lap, her fingertips trembling ever so slightly. Just when Min Kwan thought he had driven our whole family into a dead end, my mother-in-law suddenly looked up. Her eyes were completely different from before. No longer panicked, no longer pitiful. She looked straight at Min Kwan and slowly reached out to open the faded fabric bag resting on her lap. Her voice was hoarse but clear. "Wait, it seems I still have one more thing for everyone to see." The whole room seemed to hold its breath after my mother-in-law's words. Min Kwan, who had been aggressive, paused briefly when he heard her say she had something else to show everyone, but it only lasted a moment. Immediately after, he sneered, wearing a look of contempt as if an old cleaning lady could possibly produce anything threatening. He crossed his arms, mocking, "Whatever else you have, bring it out. But I'm telling you, if you don't pay the full 20 million, I'm calling the police to investigate." Quote, "Don't blame me for being harsh then." My mother-in-law did not answer immediately. She leaned down, slowly opening the faded fabric bag she had been holding against her chest. Her movements were very slow, not out of fear, but like someone trying to remember which compartment they had put the item in. All eyes in the room were fixed on her. I stood right beside her, my palms sweating, while Ton still stood half in front of his mother, as if afraid Min Kwan would say something insulting again. Then, from her cloth bag, my mother-in-law pulled out an old phone. It was a phone with a cracked screen at one corner. The back casing was held by clear tape because the battery cover kept popping off. Normally, it looked like nothing more than a piece of junk ready to be tossed. So, as soon as she placed the phone on the table, Min Kwan immediately sneered. "Do you intend to pay me with that phone?" A few people standing by the door whispered, some chuckled, and others shook their heads as if she were acting absurdly out of desperation. But my mother-in-law didn't blush. She simply wiped the screen with her uniform sleeve and looked straight at Min Kwan. "I was live streaming last night while I was working." As soon as those words were spoken, the smile on Min Kwan's face vanished instantly. I saw it clearly. He no longer looked as confident as he did moments ago. His eyes twitched, his mouth tightened, but with many people watching, he still tried to hold his ground. "So what if you live streamed? Live streaming doesn't prove that you didn't take the money." My mother-in-law didn't argue back. She bowed her head to tap on the phone. Since the device was old, it was slow, and the screen kept freezing. I saw her hands trembling, though I couldn't tell if it was from anger, fear, or just old age and poor eyesight. I quickly reached out to help. "Let me open it for you, Mom." She nodded and handed the phone to me. I went into her Facebook to find the live stream from last night. Luckily, the video was still saved. When the screen displayed images of the late-night street, yellow streetlights, the trash cart, and the silhouette of my mother-in-law holding a broom, my heart began to race. I turned up the volume and placed the phone on the table. In the video, my mother-in-law's simple, rustic voice rang out. "Today there are fewer leaves in this area than usual. I might be able to head home early tonight." Everyone in the room fell silent. The officer pulled his chair closer. Ton leaned in, staring intently at the screen. Min Kwan stood across from us, his expression growing increasingly unsightly. The video continued to play. My mother-in-law in the frame walked near a planter. Then she suddenly stopped, bent down, and picked up the wallet and the stack of cash. Her voice in the video was heard very clearly. "Good heavens, who could have dropped so much money?" I slowed down the footage where she placed the money on the trash cart lid. Even though the image was tilted because the phone was clamped to the cart, it was still quite clear. She separated each stack of cash, counting it again with trembling hands. After a few seconds, she muttered, 50 million, oh my God, whoever lost this must be heartbroken." The whole room went dead silent. The officer looked up at Min Kwan. In the video, she counted 50 million. Min Kwan immediately retorted, "People often miscount, that's normal. Besides, the video is so blurry, how can you tell the exact amount?" Ton turned around and said, "You just said you were sure there was 70 million in your wallet, so where is your proof?" Min Kwan was speechless for a moment but still insisted. "I remember my own money clearly, how could I not know?" My mother-in-law then slowly took the phone back from my hand. She no longer looked at the screen but stared straight at Min Kwan. Her voice wasn't loud, but every word was very clear. "I may be poor, but being poor doesn't mean my eyes turn greedy when I see money." That sentence made many people standing outside the door lower their heads. Perhaps they felt ashamed for having quickly suspected her just moments ago. Right then, the officer suddenly pointed at the corner of the screen. "Wait a second, rewind this part a bit." I immediately rewound it. In the distance, behind a tree and the old bus stop, a figure stood huddled in the shadows. The face wasn't clear, but the build, the jacket, and the slightly tilted posture made me feel a chill down my spine. Ton also recognized it. He looked at the screen and then slowly turned to Min Kwan. "This figure looks a lot like you, doesn't it?" Min Kwan snapped back, "What do you mean, like me?" In the dark, everyone looks the same, but sweat had already beaded on his forehead. He adjusted his collar even though the room had a fan. His eyes stopped meeting anyone's, darting between the screen and the door. The officer asked to rewind one more time. This time, everyone looked closer. That figure wasn't just standing there, he was holding a phone pointed directly at my mother-in-law. At that moment, my spine went ice cold. My mother-in-law suddenly asked, "If I stole it, why did you have to stand there and secretly film me from the start?" That question left the whole room stunned into silence. Min Kwan opened his mouth to respond, but could not get the words out. Ton took a step forward, his eyes reddening with anger. "You have been stalking my mother since last night." Min Kwan took half a step back. "I didn't, don't go making assumptions." But his voice had cracked. The person who moments ago threatened to call the police and demanded a report now suddenly seemed as if someone were choking him. I looked at him, feeling both furious and vindicated. He thought a simple cleaning lady knew nothing, thinking a spliced video was enough to smear her reputation. But he never expected that the very same old phone would bring the truth to light. The officer picked up the phone, his voice stern. "I suggest everyone keeps this video as is. We will watch it in full from the beginning." Min Kwan hastily said, "That's not necessary, it could be a misunderstanding. I was just anxious about losing my money." Mrs. Liu looked at him, her eyes red-rimmed but her voice firmer than ever. "Just now you said I took the money because I was poor. Now it is my turn to ask. You are richer than me, so why is your heart so filthy?" No one said anything more. But just when everyone thought the live stream was enough to silence Min Kwan, the officer suddenly paused the video at a brief moment before my mother-in-law picked up the wallet. He frowned, bringing the screen closer to his eyes. Quote, "Wait, there seems to be another detail before that." I leaned in to look. Han held his breath, and Min Kwan's face turned completely pale, as if he had just seen his worst fear appear on the screen. The officer kept his finger on the phone screen, his eyes no longer looking as uncertain as before. He rewound the video by a few minutes and zoomed into the left corner of the screen. Because my mother-in-law's phone was placed at an angle on the trash cart, the framing was not steady, shaking slightly with each turn of the wheels. But that very tilted angle accidentally captured the entire planter in the distance. At first, I only saw a blurry figure under the yellow light, but as the officer slowed the footage down second by second, everything became increasingly clear. Before my mother-in-law approached the tree, a man in a dark jacket stepped out from behind the old bus stop. He looked around once, then bent down to place something under the tree. Just a few seconds later, he stood up and quickly retreated into the dark corner. The officer paused the video. The whole room seemed to hold its breath. Ton stared at the screen, and I watched too, my heart pounding so hard I felt like I could hear it. Even though his face was partially hidden by his hat, his stance, the jacket, his slightly uneven shoulders, and those brown-pointed shoes looked just like Min Kwan. Ton slowly turned to look at him. "You planted the wallet and then framed my mother for stealing it." Min Kwan paled instantly, but he wasn't the type to give up easily, so he immediately retorted, "What are you talking about?" Quote, "I dropped it while I was on a call. I bent down to tie my shoe and the wallet fell out. There's nothing strange about that." The officer looked back at the video, his tone more stern. "In this clip, you didn't pull out a phone to call anyone, and there was no movement suggesting you dropped a wallet. You bent down and placed it there quite deliberately." Min Kwan was speechless for a moment, then turned and offered a cold laugh. "Can you really draw such conclusions from such blurry video? What if that person isn't me?" Just then, my mother-in-law's voice from the previous night's live stream played out. She was sweeping while talking to the people online. That guy in the black shirt has been standing here for a while. Wonder who he's waiting for so late." That sentence made Min Kwan freeze. No one needed further explanation, everyone understood. If he were just passing by and dropped his wallet, why did my mother-in-law see him standing there beforehand? Why was he hiding in the same area where the recording was made, right when she picked up the wallet? And why did he show up at the station right after, insisting that she took 20 million missing from it? An elderly man standing outside the door suddenly walked in. He was wearing a brown shirt, holding a small phone, his voice trembling slightly with indignation. "May I say something?" The officer turned to him. "Are you related to this case?" He nodded. "Last night I watched Ms. Liu's live stream, and I even commented to warn her about the man standing sneakily behind her." Saying that, the man opened his phone to show everyone his comment from last night. The text clearly appeared under Ms. Liu's video. "Watch out for the person behind the tree. It looks so suspicious." The timestamp of the comment was right before my mother-in-law found the wallet. I looked at Min Kwan. This time he could no longer maintain his calm expression, and sweat was running down his temples. He wiped it away hurriedly and said, "Don't all gang up on me. I lost money, I'm the victim here." My mother-in-law suddenly stood up. She wasn't tall, her back was slightly hunched, and her janitor uniform was faded. But at that moment, I don't know why I saw her as more steadfast than anyone else in the room. She grabbed the broom leaning against the chair and slammed the handle hard onto the tile floor with a dry thud. "Do you take me for a fool?" The whole room went silent. She looked straight at Min Kwan, her eyes red but no longer trembling. Quote, "You want to frame me as a thief to hurt my son. You see me as old, poor, and a street sweeper, so you think I don't know what shame is." Min Kwan took a half step back, but still tried to steady his voice. "Don't insult me, I'm just here to claim my money." Ms. Liu retorted immediately, "If it's your money, show the proof. As for my honor, what will you use to pay me back?" That sentence left the onlookers with nothing more to say. A woman who had been doubting my mother earlier now lowered her head and stepped back. The officer also became completely serious. He put his phone on the table and looked at Min Kwan. "Mr. Kwan, your accusations currently have many contradictions. I suggest you write a clear statement regarding the initial amount of money, the time you dropped the wallet, the reason you were at the scene, and your recording of the video." Min Kwan's face changed color. "I'm busy, I have to go back to the company." Tan said coldly, "You weren't busy when you were framing my mother, but now that you have to explain, you're busy?" Min Kwan gritted his teeth. He looked around, realized no one was on his side, and had no choice but to sit at the table. The officer handed him paper and a pen, and he lowered his head to write, the strokes so forceful it was as if he wanted to tear through the paper. But from time to time, he would look up at my mother-in-law, his eyes no longer filled with panic, but with a clear sense of resentment. I instinctively shivered. Someone like Min Kwan, once humiliated in front of a crowd, would certainly not stop easily. The statement was finished, and the officer kept it along with a copy of the live stream. Min Kwan stood up and straightened his shirt as if trying to salvage the last bit of his dignity. Before leaving, he stopped beside Tan and leaned close to my husband's ear, his voice very low, but I was standing close enough to hear every word. "Do you think you've won?" "I haven't even started yet." Tan turned back, his eyes turning red. I quickly held his arm at the committee office. If he lost control, Min Kwan would have another excuse to twist the story around. Min Kwan saw that reaction, the corner of his mouth curled up, and then he walked out as if nothing had happened. The door closed behind him, and people began to disperse, but the tension in my heart did not ease at all. My mother-in-law sat down in a chair, her hand still trembling while holding the broom. She didn't cry. She just looked in the direction Min Kwan had left and said very quietly, "He isn't afraid of being exposed, he's just angry that he couldn't hurt us." I felt a chill run down my spine as I heard her. At that time, I still didn't know how right my mother-in-law's words were. Because from the moment Min Kwan was exposed at the police station, he was no longer just competing with Tan. He started to see my mother-in-law as a thorn that had to be pulled out at all costs. After that day at the station, I thought things would at least temporarily calm down. Min Kwan had been exposed for planting the wallet, forced to write a statement, and there was my mother-in-law's livestream video as evidence. A normal person, if they had even a shred of integrity, would surely have silently backed away. But I had underestimated his vindictiveness. The news spread through the company very quickly. In just one afternoon, almost the entire sales department knew Min Kwan was suspected of deliberately framing a colleague's mother to ruin Tan's reputation. Those who previously respected him for his smooth talk began to look at him with different eyes. Someone walking past his desk even deliberately whispered, "I didn't expect him to play that dirty." Min Kwan's reputation has clearly plummeted, and the meeting for the deputy manager promotion has been postponed by the board to verify the incident. Tan told me that when the HR manager announced the suspension of the review, Min Kwan sat still, his face pale, but what was terrifying was that he showed no remorse. He stared at Tan for a long time, his eyes cold and dark like a wounded animal. That evening, Tan came home late. He didn't eat, just sat in the living room with his hands clasped together. I placed a glass of water in front of him and asked, "How is everything at the company?" He sighed, saying they postponed the review, but he isn't worried about the position, he's just worried that it won't end there. My mother-in-law sat in the corner of the room, bowing her head upon hearing this. She was still wearing her old house clothes, her hands resting on her knees. Since the incident at the ward office, she has become much quieter. I know she isn't afraid for herself, she fears her situation is affecting her son. She said softly, "Maybe I should stop working, I'll take a few days off for peace." Tan shook his head immediately. "Mom, you didn't do anything wrong. If you quit now, it's like admitting you're at fault." She didn't answer, but looking at her eyes, I knew those words weren't enough to put her mind at ease. 2 days later, what Tan feared actually happened. The neighborhood where my mother-in-law sweeps began to buzz with rumors. At first, it was just whispers at the tea stall at the alley entrance, Then it spread to the vendors, the motorbike taxi drivers, and even people living near the park she cleans. They say that cleaning lady found money and kept some for herself. The committee pushed hard, so she had to return it. There's no smoke without fire, right? Those words reached my ears when I stopped by her worksite to bring her a bottle of water. I stood behind a tree, trembling with anger as I listened. My mother-in-law kept her head down, sweeping leaves. She heard it all but didn't turn around. Her thin back under the afternoon sun suddenly looked heartbreakingly small. I stepped forward to set things straight, but she pulled my hand back. Let it be, dear. People will talk, and eventually, they'll get tired of it. I choked back my words, but they are speaking wrongly about you, Mom. She gave a very faint smile. In this life, people don't need to know the truth to start talking. That sentence hurt me more than all the gossip out there. Later that afternoon, an edited video began appearing online. Someone took a live stream of my mother-in-law, cut the clip of her picking up a wallet, and added a caption. A janitor pockets money in the middle of the night. The accuser claims 20 million is missing. Below it, an anonymous account keeps commenting. Poverty easily breeds greed. Returning it with money missing is just like stealing. Where there's smoke, there's fire. I looked at those words, and my blood boiled. I knew it was Min Kwan, or at least one of his people. He wasn't attacking directly anymore. He was using public opinion, social media, and the cruel curiosity of the crowd to tear apart a person's reputation. That evening, my mother-in-law got home later than usual. Stepping through the door, she placed her broom in the corner and took off her name tag. The small sign with "Lou" on it was scratched, its plastic edge chipped. She set it on the table so gently, yet the sound felt as heavy as a sigh in our house. She said, "Maybe I should just quit to let things settle." I looked at her, my throat tight. Ton, sitting by the table, slammed his hand on the wood upon hearing that. No, he's the one who's wrong. If you quit, he wins. Mom started as she watched her son Ton stand up, his eyes turning red. You raised me with this job, why should you be ashamed? The one who should bow their head is that guy who made this up, not you. Mrs. Liu bowed her head. A few seconds later, she whispered, I'm not afraid of shame, I'm afraid you'll lose your job because of me. The whole house fell silent. Before I could say anything, my phone rang, an unknown number on the screen. I answered, and a polite but cold male voice spoke on the other end. Quote, is this Mr. Ton's wife? I am Hua, his company's HR manager. I immediately turned on the speakerphone. Ton turned to look at me. Mr. Hua continued, the company just received a complaint that Mr. Ton used personal connections to pressure the local authorities to cover up his mother's suspected theft. Management requires Mr. Ton to be present tomorrow morning to explain himself. I was stunned. Ton snatched the phone away. Quote, who reported me? The other end of the line went silent for a few seconds before replying. It's an anonymous complaint, but it includes photos and some text messages related to the incident at the ward. For now, the company must follow standard procedure. Single quote. The call ended. I looked at Ton, then at my mother-in-law. Her face was pale. She reached out to hold onto the edge of the table as if she were afraid she couldn't stand steadily. That was when I realized Min Kwan was never cornered. He was pulling us into an even deeper pit. First, he smeared my mother-in-law's reputation. Then, he turned Ton into someone using his power to cover for his mother. He wanted the company to think my family didn't just have someone greedy, but also someone abusing their authority. Ton clenched his fists, his voice dropping low. He doesn't want to compete for the promotion anymore. I looked at him. So what does he want? He looked up, his gaze turning cold. He wants to make sure our whole family can never hold our heads up again. My mother-in-law stood silently by the table, her janitor name tag still lying there under the pale yellow light. Just a small tag, yet it represented her entire life's self-respect. And from that moment on, I knew Min Kwan was no longer just a jealous colleague. He had become someone who wanted to destroy my entire family's livelihood. A week later, the storm seemed to have calmed down a bit. The gossip in the neighborhood thinned out, and the edited video online was no longer being discussed as much as in the first few days. Ton still had to wait for the company to verify things, but at least he hadn't been formally disciplined yet. As for my mother-in-law, after a few nights of thinking, she finally put her janitor uniform back on, pinned her name tag to her chest, and went to work as usual. Before heading out the door, she said to me, if I quit because I'm tired, that's fine, but quitting because people talk badly about me, I would be ashamed of myself. My eyes stung as I listened to her. I knew she was still hurting. She just didn't want us to worry any further. That night, my mother-in-law's shift was moved to an old parking lot behind a shopping mall. It was crowded by day, but late at night, it was deserted and much darker, with only a few white lights casting shadows on the mottled concrete floor. Rows of motorbikes were parked sparsely, and a few dusty cars sat still under the corrugated iron roof. The wind blew, making the plastic tarp flap like someone was walking behind me. I had told her, "Mom, call me when you're done, and I'll come pick you up." She smiled, "It's just a few steps. I'm used to it, you go to sleep." But for some reason, I felt restless that night. Around 10:30, I was organizing some papers for Ton when the phone rang. My mother-in-law's name appeared on the screen. As soon as I answered, I heard chaotic shouting on the other end. My mother-in-law's voice was trembling. "Hong, come to the parking lot behind the shopping center. Someone says I stole their gold." I jumped up, and Ton immediately turned to look at me. "What did you say, Mom?" Suddenly, a shrill woman's voice cut in from the other end. "So you're calling your family, huh? Go ahead, call the police too. You took my gold necklace, didn't you?" Before I could ask anything else, the call was cut off. Ton grabbed the keys and rushed out the door. I followed, my heart pounding like a drum. All the way there, only one thought was in my head. It's Min Kwan again, it must be him. When we arrived, a crowd had already gathered around the parking lot. Phone lights flashed everywhere, with whispers, sighs, and someone saying while recording, "So this is the janitor who stole 50 million. I pushed through the crowd and saw my mother-in-law standing in the center, clutching an old cloth bag in one hand and still holding a broom in the other, her face pale but her back straight. In front of her was a woman in her 40s, dressed quite elegantly with curled hair and gold bracelets on her wrists. She was crying loudly, grabbing my mother's sleeve as she sobbed. "You stole my gold necklace, right? I had just taken it off and put it in my bag, and when I turned around, it was gone. You were the only one standing nearby." My mother-in-law tried to pull her hand away. "I didn't take it, I was sweeping over there. Don't frame me." The woman shrieked even louder. "If you didn't take it, let me check your bag. An innocent person has nothing to fear." Right at that moment, 2 mall security guards appeared. They arrived very quickly, so quickly that I had the feeling they had been called beforehand. One person held a walkie-talkie, while the other said sternly, "Ms. Liu, to avoid trouble, let us check your bag." Ton stepped forward immediately. "No one is allowed to search my mother's belongings without the police present." The woman turned sharply toward Ton. "Are you her son? Great, with you here, there's no fairness left. I lost a necklace worth nearly 4 taels of gold." The crowd gasped again. Someone whispered, 4 taels of gold, that's a lot." Someone else looked at my mother-in-law and shook their head. Hearing every word felt like a knife twisting in my gut. My mother-in-law looked at Ton and then at me. She took a breath, her voice raspy. "Let them see, son. If I didn't take it, I have nothing to fear." I wanted to stop her, but she had already opened her cloth bag. Inside there was only a face towel, a bottle of medicated oil, a bottle of water, a small pack of bread, and a thin raincoat. A security guard leaned over and rummaged through each item. When his hand reached the bottom of the bag, his expression suddenly froze. He pulled out a shining gold necklace. The entire parking lot went silent for a second, then erupted. The woman immediately lunged forward and snatched it. "There it is, my necklace, I knew it. She's used to this kind of thing." My mother-in-law stood frozen. I couldn't believe my eyes either. That necklace was truly inside her bag. It lay right there, glistening under the parking lot lights like a set trap. My mother-in-law shook her head repeatedly. "No, I don't know where it came from. I didn't put that in my bag." But who would listen to her now? Phones were raised higher. A man standing outside the crowd shouted, "This woman picked up money missing 20 million the other day." With just that one sentence, every gaze shifted. What Min Kwan had planted earlier now acted as fuel. People no longer saw her as someone wrongly accused, but as a repeat offender. And at the height of the chaos, Min Kwan appeared, stepping in from the mall's back entrance, his face wearing a mask of feigned surprise so fake it made me sick just looking at him. He looked at my mother-in-law, then at the necklace in the woman's hand, and exclaimed, "Wait, it's you again? Ton turned sharply. What are you doing here? Min Quan raised both hands in an innocent gesture. I had a meeting nearby, heard the noise, and came to see. I didn't expect to run into an acquaintance. He turned to the crowd and sighed. Last time, I even defended her, thinking she just found it and didn't return it. I never thought. It sends chills down my spine. With that one sentence, he cast himself as the lenient one and painted my mother-in-law as unrepentant. He is truly vicious. He didn't need to make direct accusations. He just dropped a vague remark, and the crowd filled in the rest themselves. Ton lunged forward and grabbed his collar. You're behind this, aren't you? Min Quan didn't fight back, deliberately saying loudly, did you all see that? I haven't even said anything, and he's already resorting to violence. I quickly pulled Ton's hand away. Don't fall for his trap. My mother-in-law suddenly stepped forward, staring intensely at Min Quan. This time, she wasn't trembling like she was that first night. Perhaps after being harmed once, she realized that the man before her would never stop. She pointed directly at Min Quan, her voice hoarse but sharp. You were the one who put it in my bag. The crowd erupted into an uproar. Min Quan laughed. What are you saying? You got caught red-handed, so now you're trying to blame me? Mrs. Liu did not blink. I don't know how you did it, but I know that from the moment you appeared here, everything is exactly like that day. Min Quan leaned in close, his smile twisting. Mrs. Liu, there's no live stream to save you this time. The words were quiet, audible only to Ton, my mother-in-law, and me, but they made my skin crawl. My mother-in-law looked at him and slowly tightened her grip on the broom in her hand. I saw that her eyes no longer held just humiliation. It was the resentment of an honest person pushed to the absolute edge. And I knew from that moment on, the war between my family and Min Quan had taken a much darker turn. As soon as my mother-in-law finished speaking, the whole parking lot erupted like a riot. The woman who lost her necklace immediately clutched the gold chain to her chest, wailing even more miserably. Oh my God, you stole it from me and are still framing others. To be old and have no shame, truly. Mrs. Liu turned to the guard, her voice raspy but very clear. Check the cameras, there are cameras here. If I didn't take it, the cameras will show it. Hearing my mother-in-law say that, I felt as if I were clinging to a final lifeline. That's right, a shopping mall parking lot can't be without cameras. No matter how the necklace ended up in her bag, just reviewing the footage of her passing by will clear everything up. Ton immediately spoke up. Please have the guard pull the footage right away. If my mother is wrong, we'll take responsibility, but if someone is framing her, they must be held accountable too. Min Quan stood there strangely calm, his arms crossed, a slight smirk on his lips. Exactly, let's check it and be clear. I also want to know who's real and who's fake. His tone was too composed. So composed that it sent chills down my spine. A bystander just passing by should be surprised, should want to stay out of it. But Min Quan stood there like the owner of the stage. Waiting for the next act to begin, my intuition screamed that something was wrong. 2 guards led us into the security room right next to the parking lot. The crowd still followed us outside. Many people even held up their phones to film through the glass window. The woman who lost her necklace kept crying as she walked. That was the wedding gold my mother left me. I've worn it for years. It's not some cheap trinket. You people must clear this up for me. The guard pulled up the monitor. A series of small boxes appeared showing the entrance, the parking booth, and the elevator. The corridor behind the Zone B parking lot. He clicked on the area where my mother-in-law was accused of taking the necklace. Selecting the exact time around 10 p.m., I held my breath, but the screen only showed black. The guard frowned, clicked again, still black. He switched to 5 minutes before, then 5 minutes after, but the screen still showed no image, only an error message, no data. Ton immediately asked, why is there no data? The guard looked flustered. The camera in this area must be malfunctioning. I looked him straight in the eye. A glitch at exactly that part, just at that specific time? He couldn't answer. Min Quan stood behind, suddenly smiling faintly. Well, that makes things difficult. The evidence is in the bag, and the camera shows nothing. I think the matter is quite clear now. My mother-in-law was truly panicked for the first time. She stepped closer to the screen, her eyes red. That's impossible. When I swiped, the camera light was still on. I saw it myself. The other woman immediately pointed at her face. Are you still denying it? The necklace is in your bag, and the camera shows nothing, which just proves you're quick-handed. Outside the security room, the crowd grew noisy. Someone shouted, "Old and still stealing. Money last time, gold this time, she must really be a pro. Call the police, or she'll just hurt someone else." I was shaking with anger at every word. But what hurt me most was my mother-in-law's expression. She was no longer as firm as when she pointed at Min Kwan. She stared at the black screen as if seeing the last door protecting her slamming shut. Her hands gripped the edge of the table, her voice trembling. "I didn't take it, I really didn't." No one listened. A plastic water bottle was thrown from the crowd, hitting the security room door and rolling to her feet. A man's voice outside growled, "At your age, still doing such dirty things." Ton couldn't take it anymore. He turned around and saw Min Kwan standing behind the crowd, his lips curling up for a split second. That smile lasted only a second but was enough to make Ton lose his cool. He lunged forward and grabbed Min Kwan by the collar. "Did you do this, didn't you? You deleted the camera footage, right?" Min Kwan immediately raised his hands and stepped back quickly. "If you touch me, I'm suing. Everyone look, he's trying to hit me to silence me." I quickly pulled Ton back. "Stay calm, he's just waiting for you to strike." Ton was gasping for air, his eyes bloodshot. "I know how much pain you are in. Your mother is being humiliated in front of everyone, while the culprit stands there smiling. But if you hit Min Kwan, everything will turn against you immediately." Just then, Ton's phone rang. He looked at the screen, his face changing. It was the HR manager. He answered the phone and turned on the speaker, his hands still trembling. Mr. Hoa's voice rang out, stern and cold. Quote, "Ton, the company just received more footage related to tonight's incident. For now, the board has decided to suspend you until the matter is clarified." Ton stood frozen. Mr. Hua continued, "The reason is that your family's situation is seriously affecting the company's image. I hope for your cooperation." The call ended, and the space before me seemed to sway. Ton held the phone, but his hand hung limp by his side. The man who had been composed and patient for years to keep his job now stood in the parking lot as if drained of all strength. My mother-in-law heard it, her lips trembling. For his mother's sake, Ton turned back and tried to force a smile. Quote, "It's not your fault, Mom," but his voice was hoarse and strained. I looked at Min Kwan. He stood a few steps away, feigning regret, but his eyes lit up with satisfaction. Now I finally understood. He didn't just want the deputy manager's chair. He wanted to destroy my whole family bit by bit. He wanted my mother-in-law labeled a thief, wanted Ton to lose his job, and wanted my family to bow down to him. That night, we brought my mother-in-law home in silence. She didn't say a word. Back home, she sat in the corner of the living room, hugging the old fabric bag that had been ransacked, while Ton sat on the porch smoking cigarette after cigarette, while I replayed the images in my head, trying to find some detail I might have missed. Near midnight, as I was about to tell her to sleep, she suddenly looked up, her eyes bloodshot but unusually clear. Quote, "Hong, I remember now." I immediately sat down beside her. "What do you remember?" She gripped the bag strap tightly, her voice slow. At the parking lot, before that woman shouted, a lottery-selling child was standing near me. He kept staring intently at my bag. I held my breath. She continued, every word clear. It wasn't curiosity. It was like he was waiting to see if something was already inside my bag. The next morning, before the sun got too hot, my mother-in-law and I returned to the shopping mall. Almost no one in the family slept last night. Ton sat on the porch until dawn, and whenever I closed my eyes, I saw Mother surrounded in the parking lot, the gold necklace being pulled out from the old fabric bag. Then Min Kwan's face flickering behind the crowd with that chilling smile. My mother-in-law was still wearing the same shirt she usually wears to work, but today she held no broom. She only carried her washed cloth bag, walking slowly but surely. I asked, "Are you sure the boy is often around here?" She nodded. "His face looks familiar to me. I usually buy lottery tickets from the kids around here. It's just that he pulled his hat so low last night, I didn't recognize him right away." We started asking everyone, from the drink vendor at the gate and the parking attendant outside to the old woman selling bread near the bus stop. Everyone vaguely remembered a skinny boy who often carried a stack of lottery tickets around the mall, but no one knew exactly where he lived. Some said his name was T, others called him Cu Tai. His mother is seriously ill, so he has to go out selling from afternoon until night. We walked for nearly 3 hours. My mother-in-law's shirt was soaked with sweat, but she didn't complain once. Nearing noon, a ride-hailing motorbike driver sitting under a tree heard us asking and said, "Oh, that boy? He often sits behind the temporary market near the abandoned fruit stalls. I saw him there this morning." My mother-in-law and I immediately went in the direction he pointed. Behind the temporary market was a messy patch of ground with a few old styrofoam boxes and some torn tarps providing makeshift shade. And there I saw a boy of about 12 or 13, very thin, wearing a faded t-shirt, clutching a stack of lottery tickets to his chest. As soon as he saw us, he jumped up, his eyes darting around like a young bird cornered in a trap. My mother-in-law stepped forward, her voice very gentle. "Your name is T, isn't it?" The boy backed away. I don't know anything." With just that one sentence, I knew my mother-in-law had guessed correctly. I sat down so I was at his eye level. Quote, "I'm not going to scold you, I just want to ask about last night." He shook his head repeatedly, his face deathly pale. "I didn't see anything, I don't know anyone." My mother-in-law looked at the stack of lottery tickets in the boy's hand, then reached for her purse. She isn't rich, she only had a few small bills in her wallet, but she gave them to him anyway. She bought every last ticket he had. "Don't be afraid. If you tell the truth, no one will hurt you." The boy looked at the money, then at my mother, his lips pressed tight, his eyes turning red. A moment later, he burst into tears. His sobs weren't loud, but choked, as if held back for a long time. He said, between sobs, "I didn't want to do it. That man said I just had to bump into her lightly. He gave me 500,000 and told me to hold this in my hand. When the cleaning lady walked by, I just had to bump into her and apologize." A chill ran down my spine. What was this? Little Ty lowered his head, his hands twisting the hem of his shirt. "I don't know. He wrapped it in a tissue. He said it was just a small thing. I thought it was a piece of paper or a key. I didn't know it was a gold necklace." My mother-in-law stood frozen. She didn't blame the boy. Perhaps she saw another poor soul in him, also being used because of desperation. I asked further, "What was that man wearing?" Little Ty looked around once more before whispering very softly. "A black shirt, brown shoes, and he smelled like very pungent perfume. He said if I told anyone, my mom wouldn't have money for her treatment anymore." When I heard that, my hands clenched tightly. It really was Min Kwan. He didn't just frame an old woman, he also used money to buy the fear of a poor child. But Little Ty suddenly wiped his tears and pulled his torn backpack around. He rummaged for a while and took out an old phone, its screen cracked just like my mother-in-law's. He said, "I was scared of being framed, so I recorded it." I was stunned. What could he have recorded? He opened the photo gallery, his hand trembling as he pressed on a video clip. The image was shaky and a bit dark, but it was clear enough to see the back of the parking lot from last night. Min Kwan stood by a concrete pillar, holding a small tissue in his hand. He shoved the thing into Little Ty's hand and leaned down to whisper something. A moment later, the woman who lost the necklace appeared from behind, standing next to Min Kwan, adjusting her bag while saying a sentence clearly captured in the video. Quote, "Remember to do it fast. The moment that hag walks over, she'll start screaming." I felt goosebumps all over my body. Min Kwan in the video replied, "Just make sure your acting is convincing. She's been involved in money issues before. This time, no one will believe her anymore." My mother-in-law covered her mouth with her hand, her whole body trembling, not from fear anymore, but from the stifling indignation of seeing someone calculate every step to trample her honor. I immediately used my phone to record the video from Ty's device and sent it to Ton right away. Less than a minute later, Ton called back, his voice very low, as if trying to suppress his rage. "Keep the boy there, don't let him go anywhere. This time, I'll leave him no room to deny it." I looked at Ty, he was so scared his shoulders were hunched up. Quote, "Ma'am, am I going to get arrested?" My mother-in-law stepped forward and placed her hand on his head. "No, the person at fault is the one who made you do bad things, not a child who knows fear but still tells the truth." Ty burst into tears once more. I promised to help his mother contact a hospital, while Ton would find a way to get the video to the right authorities. In that moment, I thought we finally held something that could overturn everything, but life often doesn't let you breathe that easily. That evening, when Ton and I returned to the poor boarding area where Tai lived to take the mother and son to the station to give their statements. The small room was pitch black, the door left ajar, with blankets and pillows disheveled inside and medicine bottles rolled across the floor. I asked the neighbors. A woman selling porridge said, "This afternoon, a man in a 7-seater car came to pick up the mother and son. The boy cried so hard, but his mother was too sick, so they just helped her away." I felt a chill run through my entire body. Ton stood in the middle of the empty room, his hands clenched tight. The video is on my phone, but the most important witness has disappeared. Outside the window, the wind whipped through the torn tarp, making a flapping sound. I suddenly understood. Min Kwan knew we had found Tai, and he had made his move a step ahead of us. Cut and his mother's rental room was so small that you could see everything inside just by standing at the door. An old iron bed was pushed against the wall, its straw mat frayed at the edges, next to a dusty table fan lying on its side, and on the floor lay a few cold medicine wrappers and a half-empty bottle of medicated oil. Everything was still there. Only the mother and her boy had vanished as if they had never existed. I called Cut's number again, but the line only echoed with a cold automated voice saying the subscriber could not be reached. I gripped my phone tightly, my palms cold and clammy. Ton stood beside me with a darkened expression. He leaned down to pick up a small plastic sandal lying alone under the bed, his eyes reddening as he said, "They're one step ahead of us. I understand you're talking about Min Kwan. Besides him, who else would need to silence Cut so urgently?" The boy had a video and a statement that could prove the necklace incident was staged. If Cut appeared before the police or the company, everything Min Kwan built would collapse in a single day. He certainly wouldn't let that happen. I asked the woman selling porridge at the head of the alley. She recounted that around 4 p.m., a black 7-seater car had pulled up. A man in a black shirt got out, claiming to be an acquaintance from the hospital, there to take Cut's mother for a free checkup. The boy's mother was seriously ill, and hearing the words "free of charge" made her very happy. But Cut kept crying, hugging the house pillar and refusing to leave. The porridge vendor sighed, "Poor little thing." He kept saying, "I won't go, I'm scared of that man." But his mother was coughing so much that once they helped her into the car, he had to follow. Hearing that, a chill ran down my spine. Ton took his phone to call the ward police immediately, but before he could dial, his phone rang first. The screen displayed the number of the ward officer who had handled the wallet case the other day. Ton answered and turned on the speakerphone. The officer's voice came through, sounding quite stern. Quote, "Is this Mr. Ton? Please come to the station to work with us immediately. There is a complaint against you regarding the intimidation of a minor and forcing the child to provide false testimony to slander others." I stood frozen. Ton frowned. Quote, "Who filed a complaint against me?" There was a brief silence on the other end, then they spoke. "The person who filed the complaint is Min Kwan." That name landed like a knife blow. I looked at Ton. He didn't get angry immediately, just closed his eyes softly, as if every suspicion in his heart had been confirmed. Min Kwan not only made the witness disappear, he even turned the tables, framing Ton as someone who forced a poor child to lie. We immediately headed to the ward police station. As soon as I stepped into the office, I saw Min Kwan already sitting there. He wore a white shirt, looking exhausted, clutching a tissue like someone who had just been through a great shock. Beside him lay a stack of papers and a phone placed neatly on the table. Seeing Ton, he sighed. "Ton, I really didn't want to take it this far, but dragging a child into this is just too much." Ton stared at him. "Where did you take little T?" Min Kwan immediately looked up, his voice filled with indignation. "Listen to yourself. I am the one accusing you of forcing the boy to lie, and now you blame me for taking him away. Do you have any proof?" The officer asked both of them to stay calm and played the recording Min Kwan had submitted, in which Ton's voice was very clear. Quote, "This time, I'll make sure he has no way to deny it." My heart sank as I heard it. It really was Ton's voice, but I knew that sentence. He said it to me over the phone. It was after watching the video where little T recorded Min Kwan planting the necklace. He was talking about Min Kwan, yet he cut out all the context, keeping only that one sentence to use as evidence that Ton wanted to push others into a corner. Min Kwan immediately said, "You all heard it, he had this plan all along. A lottery-selling boy with a sick mother, how would he naturally know to record a video at just the right moment if someone hadn't set it up? I couldn't hold back. You are the one who set it up. You used money to make the boy plant the necklace in my mother's bag." He turned to me, his eyes cold, but his mouth still wore a sad smile. "Ms. Hong, I understand you care for your family, But caring doesn't mean you can say whatever you want. That sentence made me shake with rage. He's such a good actor. Every word he says turns him into the victim, while we look like people who would stop at nothing just to save our mother. The news from the precinct was that the investigation was open, so he hurried to the office. Less than an hour later, Ton received a call from the HR manager. Mr. Wah stated briefly that the board had reviewed the new complaint and, to protect the company's image, Ton would remain suspended from all duties until a final conclusion was reached. I felt a lump in my throat just hearing it. Min Kwan sat opposite us, head bowed as if sad, but his lips twitched almost imperceptibly. He had been waiting for this exact moment. He wanted Ton to feel what it's like to have everything stripped away right before his eyes. That afternoon, we returned home, feeling utterly exhausted. My mother-in-law was waiting by the door, and the moment she saw the look on Ton's face, she knew something was wrong. I recounted everything, from T's disappearance to the doctored recording. She listened with trembling hands, but this time, she didn't cry. She just reached down, picked up her janitor's name tag from the table, wiped the dust off the plastic edge, and whispered, "The more he escalates, the more afraid he is." I looked at her. My mother-in-law looked up, her aged eyes shining with an unusual intensity. If he were truly certain of victory, he wouldn't have needed to take the boy. He also wouldn't have needed to doctor Ton's words. He's afraid that we'll find something before he does. Those words pulled me back to my senses amidst the chaos. Right. The more desperately Min Kwan acts, the more it proves he isn't truly in the clear. He's trying to cover his tracks and fabricate more accusations just to keep us from reacting in time. Ton sat in silence for a long time before slowly looking up. Then we have to find T before he forces the boy to sign anything. My mother-in-law stood up and put on the janitor's jacket hanging on the wall. Startled, I asked, "Where are you going, Mom?" She zipped up her jacket and said in a calm voice, "I know the places where the kids who sell lottery tickets usually hang out. This time, I'll be the one to find him." Ton stood up immediately, quote, "I'm coming with you." She shook her head, "No, you're being targeted by him. If you show up, he'll just say you're threatening a witness. Let me go," quote. I looked at her thin back under the yellow light and suddenly felt both pity and admiration. After all the humiliation, that 65-year-old woman still refused to sit and wait for someone else to save her. She knew Min Kwan was afraid, and that very fear would be the first crack for us to turn the tables. That night, while Ton was calling some acquaintances to ask for news about Tai, my mother-in-law quietly went into her room. I thought she was just too tired and went to lie down for a while. To my surprise, 10 minutes later, when I brought her a hot drink, the room was empty. On the old wooden bed lay only the shirt she wore during the day and a small piece of paper neatly placed next to the pillow. I picked it up to read, and my heart instantly tightened. "I know where the boy usually sells. Don't follow me, it'll just scare him." I rushed out to the living room. "Ton, Mom is gone." Ton, who was on the phone, immediately jumped up. He read the note, his face changing color. "How can she go out alone at this hour?" We rushed out of the house. The alley was deserted late at night, with only the sound of distant barking and yellow streetlights casting down on the damp concrete. I walked while calling her, but she didn't pick up. Each long ring made me feel like I was burning inside. A 65-year-old woman, just framed twice, was out looking for a witness in the middle of the night. Just thinking about it made my legs tremble with fear. Ton drove me back to the routes Mom usually swept. First was the park area where she found the wallet, then the parking lot behind the mall, then around the temporary market where Tai sold lottery tickets. At every spot, we asked everyone from the beverage vendor to the street hawkers still packing up late. Everyone who heard the name Mrs. Liu shook their heads and said they hadn't seen her. It wasn't until nearly midnight that a woman selling sticky rice at the corner suddenly called us over. "Is it the thin cleaning lady with gray hair, wearing an orange jacket?" I hurriedly nodded. "Yes, that's her. Where did you see my mother?" Quote, the sticky rice vendor pointed toward the road leading to the old bus station. "She just asked me about the lottery boy." I told her I saw a car taking him and his mother toward the abandoned warehouses behind the station tonight. She walked off in that direction. I felt a chill run down my spine. The warehouses behind the old station used to store goods, but they've been empty for years and are very deserted at night. Ton didn't say another word and immediately revved the engine, heading straight there. The road grew darker near the station, lined on both sides by old, stained walls and overgrown weeds. A few broken streetlights flickered like in an old movie. I sat on the back of the bike, clutching Ton's shirt tightly. The night wind whipped against my face, icy cold, but my heart felt even colder. I just prayed nothing would happen to my mother-in-law. When we reached the alley leading to the warehouses, I suddenly saw her. My mother-in-law was crouching behind a low wall, her small figure almost blending into the darkness. One hand held an old phone pressed against her chest, screen facing inward. Her other hand was on her lips, signaling us to be quiet. I ran up to ask her something, but she pulled my hand gently and pointed toward the last warehouse. Voices drifted out from inside, not loud, but clear enough to hear. Min Kwan's voice rang out first, sharp and cold. "Sign it. Once you sign, I'll give your mother money for the hospital." Then came the boy's choked voice. "Sir, I won't sign it. I'm telling the truth." I didn't make it up. I felt Ton clench his fists, but my mother-in-law held his hand back. She held up her phone to show us. The screen was in recording mode. It had been running for over 6 minutes. I looked at her, my nose stinging with emotion. An old person would usually tremble just holding a phone, yet tonight, she tracked the trail herself and stood out here to gather evidence for our family. A weak woman's voice sounded from inside. It must be the boy's mother. "Please, my child is still young, he's terrified. Please don't force him anymore." Min Kwan slammed his hand on the table, the dry thud echoing all the way out here. "Shut up. If I hadn't given you money, would you even have medicine to take? All I need now is for the kid to sign a statement saying Ton's family incited him to make a fake video. Is that really so difficult?" The boy sobbed uncontrollably. "But I really was filming. You really did give me the necklace." Min Kwan hissed, "If you don't sign, your mom won't have money for her treatment. And let me tell you, a lottery seller like you, no one will believe you even if you tell the truth." Quote, that statement made me tremble with rage. Ton was about to lunge at him, but this time my mother-in-law went first, pushing the half-open iron door wide. The screech of the hinges in the night made everyone inside turn around. Under the pale fluorescent light, Min Kwan stood by an old wooden table. On the table were some printed papers, and next to them, an envelope of cash. Little Tai sat huddled on a chair, his face covered in tears. His mother lay back on a canvas chair, her lips pale, hands clutching her chest as she coughed in fits. My mother-in-law stepped inside, her voice trembling but firm. "You're quite talented. If you can't harm an old woman, you turn to bullying a child." Min Kwan froze for a few seconds, but quickly regained his arrogant demeanor. "Old hag, have you been stalking me?" Mrs. Liu raised her old phone. The screen was still recording, and the camera had been on since she entered. "No, I'm just learning from you. You like to secretly film others, so today I'm filming you." Quote. Min Kwan's face instantly changed. He lunged to snatch the phone, but Ton stepped in front of his mother. He stared at Min Kwan, his voice chillingly cold. "Just try touching my mother." Min Kwan faltered. He looked at me, at Ton, then at the phone in my mother-in-law's hand. For the first time, I saw true panic in his eyes, not the anger of being caught like at the police station, but the fear of someone who knows they just said too much. I rushed over to help Ty's mother, while Ton pulled the boy behind him. Little Ty grabbed my hand tightly, his whole body shaking uncontrollably. "Ma'am, I didn't sign it. I haven't signed anything." I put my arms around his shoulders. "I know you're very brave, don't be afraid anymore." My mother-in-law remained in the middle of the warehouse, phone in hand, eyes locked on Min Kwan. She said, word by word, "Last time you said I was poor and therefore greedy. Today I realize there are people who wear clean shirts and polished shoes, but whose hearts are filthier than the dump I sweep every night." Quote, Min Kwan gritted his teeth, unable to argue any further. On the table, the false affidavits still lay there. On my mother-in-law's phone, every word of his coercion was clearly recorded. And before us, Cu Tai and his mother were still there, living proof that could not be made to disappear again. This time we didn't just have a video, we had recordings, the forced documents, and living witnesses in our hands. And I knew the game Min Kwan thought he had won had begun to turn around from that very moment. The next morning, Ton didn't wait for the company to call. He proactively sent an email requesting an emergency meeting, with a brief subject line regarding allegations against my mother and my own reputation. Recipients included the board of directors, the HR manager, the legal department, and the direct manager of the sales division. I knew that after that night at the old warehouse, Ton no longer wanted to avoid the confrontation. He understood that if we let Min Kwan make every first move, my family would forever be on the defensive. At 10 a.m., we arrived at the company's large conference room. My mother-in-law didn't want to go. She was afraid her simple clothes would make things more awkward for Ton. But Ton held her hand and said firmly, "Mom, you didn't do anything wrong. You aren't the one who should be embarrassed." Mrs. Liu wore an old brown shirt, her hair pulled back neatly. She sat next to me, her hands clasped together, quietly looking at the glossy glass tabletop. Opposite us sat the board of directors and HR, the atmosphere so heavy that the sound of a chair moving was clearly audible. Min Kwan entered last, wearing a white shirt and a shiny watch, looking as calm as if he had never been caught forcing a child to sign a false statement. The moment he saw Ton, he even gave a cold smirk. "Ton, resolve your family matters at home. Don't bring them here to make a scene." Ton didn't argue. He simply placed a black USB drive on the table and looked straight at the CEO. "I would like to present the evidence in chronological order. If after viewing it, the company still feels I am unfit to work here, I will accept any decision." That statement made the room go silent. The HR manager, Mr. Wah, gave a slight nod. The legal representative plugs a USB into the computer, and the large screen behind lights up. The first clip is the live stream my mother-in-law did the night she found the wallet. The whole room sees Mrs. Liu pushing her trash cart under the streetlights, hears her talking to people online, and watches her discover the wallet and the stack of cash. Ton fast-forwards to the important part. Before she arrives, a man steps out from a dark corner, bends down to place the wallet under a tree, and steps back. The screen zooms in. Even though the lighting isn't perfect, his figure, jacket, shoes, and the watch on his wrist are still very clear. A few employees in the sales department look toward Min Kwan. He tries to sit still, but his hands on his lap are clenched. Ton says, "This person didn't drop the wallet, he planted it." Min Kwan reacts immediately, arguing that the video is grainy and it could be anyone. Ton doesn't answer. He signals the legal department to play the second clip. It is the video tie recorded behind the shopping mall parking lot. The image is shaky but clear enough to see Min Kwan shoving an object wrapped in a rag into the boy's hand. After that, the woman who had claimed she lost her necklace appears next to him. Her voice rings out over the speakers. "Remember to be quick. As soon as that woman walks over, scream immediately." Then Min Kwan's voice. "She's been involved in a money scandal before. This time, nobody will believe her anymore." No one in the meeting room says a word. I look at my mother-in-law. She keeps her head down, lips pressed tightly together. I know she isn't afraid anymore, but hearing that sentence again must still hurt her deeply. Ton continues by playing the recording from the abandoned warehouse. Min Kwan's voice rings out clearly, "Sign it. Once you sign, I'll give you the money for your mother's hospital bill." Quote. Then Ty's sobbing voice, "I won't sign it, I'm telling the truth." And finally, the sentence that sends a chill through the entire meeting room. "A lottery ticket seller like you. Even if you tell the truth, nobody will believe you." The recording stops, and the room falls deathly silent. Mr. Wah, the HR manager, puts his pen on the table and looks straight at Min Kwan. "Mr. Kwan, how do you explain this?" Min Kwan forces a smile. "These days, it's easy to edit video and audio recordings. You just need a bit of technical skill to fake it all. I was being framed." The legal representative pushed up his glasses, his voice ice cold. "We checked the metadata before this meeting. All 3 files are original and continuous, with no signs of editing or abnormal audio cuts. Do you want us to send them for an independent audit?" Min Kwan's face went pale, but he still persisted. "Metadata can be forged too." At that exact moment, the conference room door opened, and an admin staff brought in the woman who had accused my mother-in-law of stealing her necklace. Today, she didn't have that aggressive look from the other night. Her face was pale, her eyes cast downward, and her hands gripped her bag strap tightly. Min Kwan jumped up. "Who let you in here?" The CEO frowned. "Sit down." The woman was invited to sit opposite them. At first, she denied it, claiming she really did lose her necklace and that she only happened to know Min Kwan. But when the legal representative placed a document before her, requiring her to work with the police if she continued to lie, she burst into tears. I'm sorry, I didn't mean for it to get this big. Kwon is my cousin. He told me if I just acted a little to discredit that cleaning lady, he'd pay me 30 million. The room erupted in murmurs. Min Kwon lunged forward and shouted, "Shut up, you took the money, don't betray me now." Quote, the words spilled out too quickly. As soon as he said it, he realized he had just shattered his last line of defense. The room went silent. The CEO looked at him with an icy gaze. Ton stood up. He didn't shout or lunge like he had before. His voice was deep and clear. From the start, you didn't want to win through merit. You only wanted to drag others into the mud. Min Kwon looked at Ton, his eyes bloodshot, but he had no words left to answer. As for my mother-in-law, she slowly looked up. She didn't scold him. She just looked at the man who had used her poverty to set a trap and said, "You thought a janitor only knows how to bow her head, but if I can sweep the trash off the street, I can certainly handle the filth in people's hearts." That sentence left the entire conference room in silence, and for the first time after many days of being wrongly accused, I saw my mother-in-law stand tall. Without fine clothes or status, she still made everyone who once doubted her look down in shame. Min Kwon stood in the middle of the meeting room, his face turning pale after his slip of the tongue to that woman. He knew he had just admitted to paying to stage the necklace incident, but he probably still thought it was just a case of personal slander. He still clung to the final hope that by admitting fault due to anger or blaming workplace rivalry, he could still have a way out. But just then, the meeting room door opened again. A middle-aged man in a gray suit walked in, carrying a thick file. I recognized him from a few company parties I had attended with Ton. That was Mr. Tung, the chief financial officer. He was usually very quiet, with a calm, unreadable face. But that day, the moment he walked in, he placed the file directly on the table before the CEO. He said, "I would like to add something. The 50 million in the wallet was not Min Kwon's personal money." The whole room went dead silent immediately. Min Kwon turned sharply. "What are you saying?" Mr. Tung did not look at him right away. He opened the file, pulling out bank statements, internal advance slips, and a table of currency serial numbers. He pushed them all toward the CEO. "This morning, after receiving the evidence about the wallet, I checked the project advances that Mr. Kwon is in charge of. There was a 50 million withdrawal from the project fund, cited as client meeting expenses. The time of withdrawal coincides with the evening the incident occurred." The CEO picked up the papers to review them, his expression growing increasingly cold. Mr. Tung continued, articulating each word clearly. "More importantly, the serial numbers in the photo of the money stack from Ton's mother's livestream match those recorded by accounting when the funds were released, meaning that 50 million was company money." I was stunned hearing this, and Ton also turned to look at me with astonishment in his eyes. My mother-in-law sitting beside me gently squeezed my hand. She didn't fully understand those financial documents, but she understood one thing clearly. The money Min Kwon used to frame her wasn't actually his. Min Kwon stammered, "No, it's not like that. I only borrowed it. I intended to pay it back the next day." The CEO slammed the folder onto the table. "You used company money to frame a colleague's mother? Do you think this company is a marketplace?" That shout made Min Kwon jump. He opened his mouth to explain, but before a word came out, Mr. Tung cut him off. "If it were just once, it could be called borrowing, but this is not the first time." Mr. Tung took another set of documents and handed it to the legal department, containing a list of client entertainment expenses Min Kwon had declared over the past year. Many items were listed as partner meetings, dining, or client gifts, but when cross-referenced with receipts, they didn't match. There are invoices with the same codes appearing in two different reports. Some entries claimed clients had signed contracts, but in reality, those contracts never existed. An accountant sitting at the end of the table suddenly stood up, her voice slightly trembling. "I would like to add that in the past, Mr. Kwon often asked me to record entertainment expenses exactly as he dictated. When I questioned him, he said the department head had already approved it. I was afraid it would affect my job, so I didn't dare to report it." Min Kwon turned and shouted, "Don't you dare frame me." The accountant's eyes turned red, but she continued to speak. "I still have the messages you sent. You told me that if I didn't follow your orders, I shouldn't expect to have a peaceful time in the accounting department." The meeting room was buzzing with murmurs once again. The dark truth behind Min Kwon's polite facade began to be peeled away. Another sales employee, who had always been very quiet, also stood up. "I would also like to report something. Last quarter, Mr. Kwan forced me to adjust our team's sales figures to transfer some of my clients to his name. When I refused, he kicked me off a major project. Min Kwan completely lost his composure. His face turned red and the veins in his neck popped out. He pointed a finger toward Ton, shouting, "It's his fault, it's all his fault. If it weren't for him, I would have been promoted already. Everything I did was only because I deserved it more than he did." No one said a word for several seconds. That outburst was the true face of Min Kwan. There were no more victims, no more people missing money, and no more colleagues whose honor had been insulted. Only a man blinded by jealousy, willing to use company funds, children, and the elderly to get what he wanted. Ton stood up, looked at Min Kwan for a long time, and said, "That chair didn't make you look bad. You revealed the kind of person you are all on your own." Min Kwan looked as if he had been slapped in the face. He tried to lunge forward, but the company security guards had already been called in to stand by the door. The CEO stood up, his voice firm. Quote, "From this moment on, Min Kwan is suspended from all duties. The legal department will prepare a file for the authorities regarding his slander, witness coercion, and misuse of company funds. The finance department will continue to audit all related advances." Min Kwan stood frozen in his tracks, his white shirt still crisp, his watch still gleaming on his wrist. But in the eyes of everyone now, he had no dignity left. The CEO turned to Ton, his voice lowering, "The company will restore Ton to his position immediately. At the same time, on behalf of the company, I apologize to your family for allowing unverified accusations to affect everyone's honor." Ton did not answer immediately. He looked at his mother. That was when all eyes in the room turned toward Mrs. Liu. The 65-year-old woman had been sitting quietly in the corner of the table the whole time, in her old brown shirt, her calloused hands resting on her knees. She did not belong in this luxurious room, yet she was the one who caused all those dirty fabrications to collapse. The CEO stepped in front of her and bowed slightly. Quote, "Mrs. Liu, we owe you an apology." My mother-in-law stood up, looking a bit awkward as if she were not used to being respected in front of a crowd. She looked around the room, at the faces that had once doubted her because of rumors, then said slowly, "I am truly poor, and I really do sweep streets, but I do not sell my self-respect for anyone's money." No one clapped right away. The room went silent for a few seconds, a heavy yet pure silence. Then I don't know who was the first to stand up, followed by the second. Then the third, and applause rang out slowly, spreading across the meeting room. I stood beside my mother, tears streaming down, unable to hold them back. After so much humiliation, her honor was finally restored. Not with money, not through Ton's position, but with the truth. And that truth, even if it came late, was enough to make the person who trampled on her bow his head. The story of Min Kwan spread very quickly after the meeting at the company. Not only within the company, but the whole neighborhood where we live knew everything. People passed around the original video, the recording in the warehouse, and the fact that he used company money to frame a cleaner out of pure professional jealousy. For the first few days, I thought my mother-in-law would be very gloating. After everything she endured, who wouldn't want to see the person who hurt them pay the price? But no, she remained the same, waking up early, brewing her own tea, and sitting out in the yard to pick vegetables. The only difference was that this time, when someone passed by and looked at her, their eyes were no longer full of suspicion or contempt. One afternoon, as my mother was sweeping the front of the alley, a motorbike taxi driver stopped in front of her. I recognized him as the man who had stood outside the parking lot that day, loudly accusing my mother of being a fake and greedy. He got off his bike, stood awkwardly for a long time, and then bowed his head. Quote, "Ms. Liu, that day I listened to the rumors. I was wrong." My mother-in-law rested her broom on the ground and looked at him for a few seconds. I thought she would scold him or at least be cold to him, but she just smiled gently. "If you're wrong, just fix it. Everyone makes mistakes sometimes." After saying that, she leaned down and continued sweeping, as if the matter wasn't worth keeping in her heart. That day, I stood inside the house looking out, and my nose stung with emotion. There are people who never had high education or used flowery words, yet the way they live makes others feel small with shame. After the company verified the entire incident, Ton was reinstated in his job immediately. 2 weeks later, the official appointment letter for the deputy manager position arrived. When he brought the letter home, I was so happy that I stood in the kitchen and burst into tears. The days of suspension, rumors, and suspicious glares were finally over. But my greatest joy wasn't my husband's new position, but the moment during the internal meeting when the investigation results were announced. In front of the whole company, the CEO walked down to the front rows, shook my mother-in-law's hand, and said, "Thank you for reminding us that kindness has no age or profession." Then the entire hall stood up and applauded. The applause wasn't thunderous, but it lasted for a very long time. I turned to look at my mother-in-law, who was so flustered that she kept tugging at her shirt, her eyes red and welling up with tears, perhaps in her 65 years of life. This was the first time a cleaner like her had been shown such respect by so many people. As for little T and his mother, after everything was cleared up, the company covered their medical expenses so she could continue her treatment. Ton even asked friends to help find the boy a vocational school so he wouldn't have to wander around selling lottery tickets every night. My mother-in-law was different. She didn't have much money, but one day, she unexpectedly pulled an old tin box from the closet, containing the savings she had tucked away for so long. She handed it to me and said, "Take me tomorrow to buy T a phone for his online classes." I was surprised. "Keep that money for your retirement, Mom." She smiled. "He helped me save my honor." Buying him a phone is nothing compared to that. When we gave the new phone to little T, he clutched it tightly to his chest and cried. His mother cried too, and my mother-in-law just patted his head, telling him to study hard. Don't let people look down on you forever. A while later, life gradually returned to normal, or at least a new normal after all the incidents that had occurred. One thing that surprised me was that even though everything was cleared up, my mother-in-law still refused to quit her job. Ton told her many times, "We can take care of you now, Mom, please just rest." She shook her head, "I'll rest if I'm tired, but not because I have to." But quitting out of shame? No way. Exactly 1 month after the incident, she put on her old uniform, grabbed her hat, and pushed her cart back to work as if nothing had ever happened. The only difference was that a tiny camera was now attached to the front of the cart, which Ton had bought for her after the incident with Min Kwan to keep her from being framed again. My mother-in-law complained at first that it was too much of a hassle, but eventually, she let her son attach it to the cart. Every night when she went to work, that little camera's light would turn on, and her old, cracked phone was still clipped to the front just like before. She still went live every night, but now it wasn't just to chat and ease her loneliness. Some days I would watch and listen to her sweeping the street while talking to the folks online. Being honest doesn't always help you avoid misfortune. Sometimes, people even take advantage of you. But if you live right, even when you're pushed to a dead end, you still have something to hold your head up for. Her voice was slow and raspy amidst the sound of the broom scraping against the pavement. No lecturing, no complaining. Just like someone who has been through enough bitterness to know what is truly worth holding on to in life. As for Min Kwan, he was later fired by the company and sued for defamation, witness coercion, and embezzlement. Word is, before he was taken away, he sent one last message to Ton. "I only lost because your mother got lucky." Ton showed the phone to his mother. I thought she would be angry, but she just stared at the message for a long time and smiled faintly. "It's not luck, it's that if you're a decent person, even if you're a bit slow, heaven still leaves a path for you to walk." That night, I stood at the end of the alley watching my mother-in-law push her trash cart under the yellow streetlights. Her figure was small, her back slightly hunched, her hands still calloused from holding a broom for decades. The street was quiet and deserted, with only the rhythmic, rustling sound of the broom echoing in the wind. She is still poor, still an ordinary sanitation worker, but in my eyes, she is the one who has kept not only those streets out there clean but also the honor of this family. End.